Gallery, add new sketch. I for information. Undo arrow. Redo arrow. Brush editor. Draw styles. Free draw. Line tool. Rectangle tool. Circle tool. Symmetry. Text. Transform. Layers. We're going to start today with layers. So please tap your layers palette to open it up and use Flower Plus to go to your photo library and bring in your grid. We're going to use that grid as a graph paper background so that we can create parallel and perpendicular lines. When you bring that grid in, you'll see it does not fill up your screen. So we'll need to transform it. Please tap Transform. And the fourth icon is Scale. It looks like two rectangles. Tap Scale, you get a red push pin, then you can pull your grid out until it fills up the screen. I'm done. Go back to Layers, press Just Plus to give yourself a new layer. This layer is the one we're going to do all of our perspective drawing on, but we need to turn down the opacity on it. I know it's selected because I see the blue rectangle around it, highlighting it. Let me come down to the opacity slider and slide it to the left until that layer goes down to about 85%. Now I can draw on that layer and see through it to my grid in the background. The next thing I'm going to do is use two fingers to pinch and zoom out to about 90% and fill my screen with blue. I'm filling my screen with blue so it's a little bit easier on your eyes so that you're not seeing that white screen. And normally I would draw in all white, but I am going to use blue today. All right, I'm looking at the city landscape picture on the left, and of course I need to start with my horizon line and my vanishing point, and then I can start my street. Step 1, draw a rectangle around your picture. I'm going to use black, and I'm going to use pen tool from here on out. Opacity is all the way up, radius is down pretty far. Rectangle tool. Next, my horizon line. Please make sure you are following the line on your grid so that it is parallel to the top and bottom of your drawing area. Then I'll use free draw to create my vanishing point. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. I'm going to put mine as close to the middle as possible, but it does not have to be exactly in the middle. There's my vanishing point. That's where all of my lines are going to meet. For our purposes, I'm going to make it a little bit larger so we can all agree where it is. Let me get my line tool back out. And next I'm going to create my street and my sidewalks. Again, yours does not have to look exactly like mine. In fact, I would prefer that you're somewhat creative with yours. After I do my street, let me put a little bit of a curb on my sidewalk. That's where the sidewalk raises up some from the street level. Here's the other edge of my sidewalk. Okay, so now I know where my buildings are going to go, either to the left or to the right of that sidewalk. The next thing I'm going to do is create one more line that is a step over from the sidewalk. See, a lot of buildings don't come down right to the sidewalk, so this is going to space some of our buildings over. In case they want to have some bushes out front or a bench or something, they have a little more room. Next, I'm going to switch to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to start drawing the rectangular faces for each of my buildings. Now, all this is going to overlap some. That is okay. This is our plan. Our next layer is going to have the finished product on it. So there is this edge of this building. I'm not going to do the perspective lines yet. Right now I'm just laying out these edges. Now I'm going to do this edge of this building. It's back behind that one a little bit. Then I'm going to do this face of this building. I can see that it's spaced down quite a distance from the one that I just drew, and it's very tall. And then I'm going to do this face of this building. And this is my last one on the left side. So there are 5 buildings on the left-hand side of the drawing. On this side, I'm going to start with this building furthest in the back. I can see it's about even with the one across the street from it. Then I'm going to do this building in front of it. And this building beside it. And this building beside it. Now, personally, I don't like this building. I don't like the L shape of it. So I'm just going to do a regular, large, rectangular building right here. And I do like the shape of this building, so I'm going to try it. And for that building, I'm going to do a rectangle and then use line tool to do that diagonal shape on that building. Now from here, we need to draw a line of perspective from each one of the corners on these rectangles all the way back to the vanishing point. So imagine lines coming from every one of those corners all the way back to the vanishing point. So I have my line tool out. And I think I'm going to change colors for this so that I don't confuse myself later on. Let me pick a purple. I don't normally draw in purple, so this is going to help me remember that this is just for my guiding lines of perspective. So I'll begin right here. There's the first building. And now, what's really, really important about this is that I use my grid to get the end of that building. And the end of that building has to stop before I get to the front of that building. So again, I follow that line on the grid, draw my line for that edge, follow my grid to get the line for that edge. There's my first building. Let me go back to purple. We go to the building behind it and draw lines that connect those vertices to our vanishing point. And that one's only going to have one because this building is pretty much on the horizon line and I won't be able to see the bottom of it because this building is in front of it. I do need the edge of it though, and this building is going to stop right in front of the building behind it. So I need that edge. And I need to follow the grid line. Let me get that very straight up and down, following the lines on the grid. And I'll go back to purple. This building over here, draw my perspective line. Now let me give myself my black edge, and this building's got to stop before it gets to the next building. So I'm going to put my edge right beside that. Something else I can do that will help us out is I can use my black line tool to finish these buildings off. I know where the line of perspective is. This will help me remember where the building is. Let me go back to purple. Now I need to draw these edges. This building that is above the horizon line has a line of perspective from the top, and it has a line of perspective from the bottom. And for the very last building, likewise, line of perspective from the top and a line of perspective from the bottom. And I'll switch back to black so that I can do the final edge of each of these buildings. I'm following the lines on the grid so I can get that as close to vertical as possible. And I'm retracing these lines of perspective with the black lines. It's going to help me know where those buildings are. Well, there's half of my city right now. And I left the lines of perspective in purple so you could see how they help me create my finished product. There's a screenshot to help me remember how I got the left side of my city. I'll switch back to purple, and I'm using Line Tool. I'm going to continue drawing my lines of perspective. This time I'm going to start with the building at the rear and work to the front. Again, your buildings do not have to look exactly like my buildings. Every city is different, and I hope your city looks different than mine. You're welcome to copy any of these ideas that you want, though. I'm going to do these lines a little bit more quickly. Now that I know what I'm doing, I have a rhythm to it. Okay, now let me switch back to black, and I'm going to do the vertical lines that are the edges of these buildings. So this building has an edge. Again, I'm following the lines on the grid, and there's the top edge of that building. I'm retracing the line of perspective. Now this building has to stop before it gets to the next one. Retracing that line of perspective. This building goes behind that one, so we don't even see that last edge. We did a large building. For the L-shaped building, it needs to have a vertical edge that stops just in front of that building. So it's actually become a very tall, very narrow building. It's not very wide, but there are some buildings in cities that are not very wide. That's okay. And then our triangular shaped building gets another edge. It's got to stop in front of the building next door, remember? So let's put the vertical edge on it right here. We'll retrace the front of that building. Retrace the line of perspective that helps us make the top. Here, the last line is that last diagonal line that makes the last edge of it. There we go. Now there's my city. I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. Now when we look at the city landscape over here on the left, we see that these buildings have a lot of other lines, like the lines that separate the floors on the skyscrapers, lines for bricks, lines for stripes, lines for awnings, lines for windows. So, after I take that screenshot, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some of those details. But first, we're going to create a new layer. So go to your Layers palette, press plus for a new layer. That old layer, we're going to turn the opacity down even more. I'm turning opacity down to about 40%. And on my new layer, I'm going to redraw those buildings as neatly as possible, making sure that I'm not showing the building behind it. So I need to start with the buildings up front and then go back. So I'm going to work from this front right side all the way around to my front left side, drawing each building one at a time as carefully as possible. I've got my black pen tool using Line Tool, and I'm going to zoom in on each one because I don't need to go all the way to the vanishing point this time. What I do need to make sure I do is make sure I follow the lines on the grid so I get nice, neat, parallel lines. And I need to follow my lines that I used in my design. So that second layer with all the lines of the perspective was the design layer. So now this is my finished drawing that I'm working on. I need to be super neat, make sure all my corners join up and the lines don't extend past. There's the front building, the triangular building. Now let's do the large building behind it. Remember, we changed it. It is no longer going to be an L-shaped building. It's a regular building. Notice I'm not drawing all the way across because we can't see through that front building anymore. I know the line goes all the way across. I'm taking time with undo arrow to get this just the way I want it. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I want to make sure I touch the lines on both sides. I want to make sure I follow the line on the grid. When a line doesn't go the way I want, I just hit undo arrow and try it again. Now, these are the vertical edges of that building. That's the top edge. There, that's the whole building. Again, we changed it from being this L shape to being a regular building. Now for this building behind it. I didn't make mine quite as tall as the one in the illustration. That's okay. Again, your city does not have to look just like the one in the illustration. You're welcome to look at it for ideas though. Next, the building behind that one. Building beside it. There's one side of my city. Now, this building is too tall. I need to make it shorter. It's behind this building. So I'm going to use my eraser and erase part of that line that I drew. Okay, so there is the rough plan for my city. Wow, that was a lot of work. It looks really great though. I'm really pleased with the way it's turning out. And you can still see my lines of perspective in the background, but they're on a separate layer. The thing to do now is to save your work. You've put in a lot of work on this. So we're going to save what you have right now. Please do the following. Press plus and save. And then when you go to your gallery, we're going to open up our gallery. There's my perspective drawing. I'm going to tap it till I get a blue rectangle and then come to plus plus. Plus plus copies that picture. So I'm going to save what I have right now, but I'm going to make a copy. And then we can use edit to come back and continue working on our copy. And from here what we need to do is open up layers, use the eye icon, put an X over it, and that's going to cover up our lines of perspective and allow us to work on all the details, the windows, etc. But we do need to go in and add our street before we do that. So let's come back to our drawing layer. We'll use the pen tool on black and the line tool to come in and recreate our street. And we also need our horizon. So there's our horizon. We need all of these lines that helped us make our sidewalk and our curb. We don't need the line that helped us space our buildings back from the edge of the sidewalk. And I think we will need a rectangle around our whole piece. So there's our street. Some of my lines went just a little bit too far. So let me use my eraser tool with a very small radius to clean that up a little bit. Likewise, my street went a little too far. So now that I have the street, let's spend some time adding some windows to some of these buildings. Let's use line tool. And let's start with this building right here, because the building in the picture has crisscrossing lines. So this is a simple way to do your windows. I'm simply going to divide that building. Let's divide it. And let's do this. For our windows, let's make the radius of the pen tool as small as it will go. And that will help us remember what each line is supposed to represent. Is it supposed to represent the edge of the building? Or is it supposed to represent the edge of the windows? So that building just has several vertical lines on it. Again, I'm looking at the grid to help me be successful. I'm making sure I don't draw over other buildings. I stop when I get to the next building. There. And then it has lines that are like the lines of perspective. They go all the way back to that point. Ooh, this could be tricky. Looks like we're going to need some more lines of perspective to help us get all of these lines that run horizontal on the side of the building. So let's do this. Let's add more vertical lines. I'm going to add the vertical lines on this building right over here. And now that I've done that, let's go back to our layers. We're going to have to delete this layer. We're going to have to delete this layer so that we can get a new layer. Press plus to get a new layer. Move it underneath the layer we're drawing on. Make sure it's highlighted with blue so we know it's selected and you're ready to draw. Now we need to draw, for each one of our buildings, some lines of perspective that's going to help us create windows on our building. So I'm going to pick red. I'll pick a different color this time. And I've got line tool. So my front building looks like it has about 6 floors to it. I need to space them out pretty evenly, and each one of these needs to go all the way back to the vanishing point. So my building ended up having 5 floors of windows on it. And then of course on the front I'll do horizontal lines that go all the way across. For this next building, it also has lines that go all the way back to the line of perspective. And I'm trying to space these apart as evenly as possible. Now for this building, allow me to add some lines on the side of it. But let me change colors. I'll go to green. And let me do this large building on this side, also in green. So depending on the details you want your building to have, we're going to have to do a lot more lines of perspective. And again, that'll be on your second layer. Then you can come in on your final drawing layer. Once you have those lines in, and use the black pen tool to be able to retrace those lines. I'll zoom in on that building with the green lines. And again, I'm just retracing the green that I need for that floor of windows. So again, my perspective lines, my green lines are on one layer. And those would actually continue across the front of the building as well. And I just follow the lines on the grid for that part. For my red lines, I'm going too far. See, I've got them over here on this building. That's why you have to be very careful. That's why I'm using some different colors to help me keep my lines straight on which ones go on which building. That's why I'm also only doing a couple of buildings at a time before I trace back over with my third and final layer. So please make sure you're switching back and forth between layers carefully so you don't get those layers confused. And these lines would continue on the front of that building as well, following the lines on the grid.